Perfect. This is mine. So I always have this.
Okay, and I got your stuff right there.
Okay. So I answered all five of the questions. Look at us. We're all organized and prepared.
But
Okay.
you
Ready?
got me like that. That's you doing it. You got me doing that, like all the way together, like fast. I told you I was dreaming. I woke up, saw the appointments, and I was dreaming that I was late for my appointments.
Mhm.
So nobody's on right now.
Okay.
Said somebody, hi. I can't see who it is. Last
Okay.
time, last time Lashandra could see the chat. I
Okay.
Let me see the chat.
Um,
Oh, let me see.
yes.
I see the chat.
Oh,
Yay.
hi.
Can you see it?
I see it.
Wait, how come it won't let me scroll up on the chat? Up. Hi, Moto X Addict.
Hi.
Motocross Addict. Duh, I just got it. You know what, Motocross Addict? My brother is a motocross technician. So we love motocross too. We spend a lot of time at the track and motocross world. He does every type of bike, every motocross, Loretta Lynn's, all that stuff. So yeah, we are motocross folks. Okay. Hey everybody. Hey Dre. Is it
Yes.
Dre or Dre? Andrea. We got a lot of Dre's and Drea. Okay. Hey.
Feel from past
Praise
traumas.
God. Praise God.
That's amazing.
Well, stay tuned because the next video this is going to be a series, and we're going to be going. First, we're starting off with Dr. D, and these will all be with Dr. D. Well, you know what? Go ahead. So y'all know I'm Tony, Esther's Way. Hey, Felicia. But Dr. D, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell them about yourself and what it is that you do.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I am Dr. D. Yes, I'm excited for the combo too. Hey everybody. So I am a licensed clinical psychologist, and I am also the owner of Come Alive Coaching and Transformative Services. And so, essentially, what I do is I like to mix psychology and the Christian faith together. So I'll tell you a little bit about how the company got started and kind of where that's coming from, Tony. So in 2018, my life pretty much fell to bits. So every bit of my life that could go upside down went upside down. So family, finances, work, just everything kind of fell apart. And in the middle of that really, really difficult season in my life, I remember I was laying in bed and I was praying and I was probably crying because that's what happens when life is just upside down on you. So I was praying and I grabbed my Bible and I remember I was like pretty much at my wits' end. And I was like, God, you have got to like show up, like say something. I really need you. And so I was flipping through my Bible and I actually landed on Ezekiel 37. And if anybody, right? And
And that is the scripture, man.
I never read that scripture
Oh,
before.
that's the dry bones, baby.
Yes.
I know that scripture well.
Yes, I hadn't even like heard anyone reference it that I remember, at least in my adulthood. So I was thumbing through, and I remember I immediately texted my mom, and I was like, "Mom, I opened the Bible to this scripture, and like, if this is about to be something terrible, I don't want." I was like, "Is it good or bad?" She was like, "It's good. Read it." So I read it, and it was beautiful. It was definitely directed, by God for me to open it there. And so I remember reading it, and basically, for those of you who haven't read Ezekiel 37, please do. It will bless you. But it's the valley of the dry bones. And so basically, we all know that bones are pretty well dead. Like there's nothing left to resuscitate. And in the Bible, it even talks about them being like bleached by the sun. Like not only were they dead, but they were like dead. You know what I'm saying? Like they were gone. And so so, Ezekiel spoke to the bones, right? To live again, to come to life. And obviously by the grace of God and by his leading, that's exactly what happened. And so when I was reading that, I was just thinking about how to my own human eyes, my situation felt like, how in the world am I ever going to get through this? Like there's nothing left here. You know what I mean? Like I'm like everything that I had worked for, everything that I had built for myself by my own like sweat is gone. And so basically when I was reading that scripture, it made me realize that there was still hope. You know what I mean? That starting basically with the physical, right? With the faith and the word from the God to start in the physical. I was like, okay, like my life can be put back together just like these bones. And when you look at it, it was like it started with the physical. So the bones came together, and then there was muscle, and then there was skin, and they were still not there. Like they weren't there yet until God breathed right into them.
Come on.
And then they came to life, right? They came alive. That's the name of my company, Come Alive, right? So they came alive. And so that just reminded me, like, you know what? Even in my field, like I work so hard with folks in the physical world, like to make sure that they've got the muscle and the skin and all this stuff. But I don't see that sustainable growth, that real soul level healing without them having that faith and that connection to God, right?
Right.
And so for me, I was like, I've got to join the two. Like, I've got to join my education and my knowledge, the natural, right? So the coming together of the physical. We got to put some feet on our faith. We'll talk about that. We got to get this stuff moving, but we got to have the natural, right? So, and that's great. So I want to work there, but I was like, we got to have God in the mix. Like, God brings the super, right? And then it's supernatural. So
Yes.
that's how my company came to life. So it's called Come Alive because of Ezekiel 37. That no matter how a situation looks, like no matter how bleak, how dead, like bleached bones, like that's gone. You know what I mean? Even that came back. So essentially, my company is trauma recovery for everybody. Because I tell folks every single human being alive has been through something.
Yeah.
All of us in recovery from something. And to move from this more superficial striving, right? Like we're like, I'll get the self-help book, I'll drink the green smoothie, I'll go for a walk, I'll do all this stuff in my own strength, you know what I mean, to feel better, to move away from that superficial kind of striving to get our lives placed back together and really get to a soul level healing, right? That soul level restoration. That is what I do. That is what I help folks to do.
Praise God.
Obviously through the grace of God. So that's me in a nutshell. That's what, yeah.
God,
That's
no, we
me.
thank God for your platform.
Yeah.
And first of all,
Yeah.
give everybody your social media platform so that they can stay connected to you because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you've got these answers. You got the answers. We all need. Listen. Spiritual is wonderful. It's
Hmm.
wonderful, but
Hmm.
there are literally, that there's the Lord was ministering to me earlier about healing,
Okay.
because I have had been diagnosed with an autoimmune several years
Hmm.
ago, and then had to go through a re-diagnosis process. And the Lord started me on a journey of healing, but there are some healings that are plain. And I'm talking about physical and mental. There are
Yeah.
some healings that are plain outright supernatural. They see a
Hmm.
tumor, then all of a sudden they don't see a tumor.
It's
But then
gone.
there are some healings, I believe, that you walk out that healing. And
Yes.
so the Lord has me. I haven't been on a steroid in over 2 years, but I mean, I take tons of vitamins. I try to eat right. I exercise moderately. But I have not had to go through any chemo or anything at all. That most
Mhm.
people
Yeah.
who have been diagnosed with what I have or what I had, I try I
Mhm.
try to speak life, and I actually don't call it by name or talk about it. But
Yeah.
some healings are like I said, they're supernatural turnarounds. But then other healings are it's where your faith is supernatural. It
Yeah.
requires supernatural faith, and so
Yeah.
you are walking that thing out day to day. And with psychology, what I have obviously, I've said this a few times that I came out of depression, suicidal thoughts, and a really severe eating disorder.
Hmm.
And that I went through therapy, and although the spiritual was taking place, and God was really healing this heart of mine and this brokenness. I mean, things that had happened from the time I was like a tiny kid, rejection and stuff like that. Um, the my therapist was able to give me actual tools and strategies to, along with scripture. That's why I like your word
Hmm.
on scriptures as affirmation. Along with scripture, even just giving me a background to like how my brain was really working. Why did I stop eating when things were out of control? Because it was my way
Hmm.
of controlling things. So I really, really am excited about getting into this with you, because there are literal strategies that we can adopt every day to help
Yes.
us combat, along with scripture and the presence of God, to heal and equip us for our next relationships.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
of course, we're going to be talking a lot about marriage and dating
Yes.
because this is a supernatural season of, I mean, not even friendships, divine connections and partnerships.
Yes.
So, thank you for
Yes.
joining us. So,
Absolutely.
the title of this video is How Past Hurts Can Hinder Present Promises, because there is something that I do want you to touch briefly on if you can.
Sure.
I
For
put
sure.
how past hurts can hinder present promises because you made me privy to something I had never heard before, and that is not just post-traumatic trauma and
Yeah.
disorder, but you
Yeah.
said there was something called post-traumatic growth. And sometimes
Absolutely.
we have a tendency to look at the bad stuff, but there's so
Yeah.
many wonderful things that we can bring into relationships because of our trauma. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you take it. So what does it mean to have a trauma?
Sure. So that is something that is tricky for folks. So what can sometimes happen is people like to kind of grade traumas and say, okay, well, if you've been through this experience or that experience, then it's a trauma. But if not, then maybe it's just a difficult time and you need to move past that and all that kind of stuff. So first things first, I don't use a grading scale when it comes to trauma. Because different people have different levels of pain that they've experienced and different things that they've endured. And what could be traumatic for one person actually may not be for another. So that's something that people forget about. They think that there has to be categories to trauma. And there are some big ones for sure. Some of the big ones that we want to think about are things like childhood, right? Childhood trauma, those things that happen to us as we're forming and developing. Things that happen in our adulthood, like interpersonal traumas. So divorces, breakups, betrayals, loss of loved ones, death, all of those sorts of things. So anytime that we are feeling helpless, anytime that we are feeling hopeless, anytime that we are hurt in some way, whether it be psychologically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, but we carry those things. We carry that if we're not quite sure how to move through it and set it down. But trauma is something that happens. You're one way before it happens, and then that thing happens, and then you're a different way after it happened, right? That doesn't mean you can't get back. That doesn't mean you can't come back stronger in some ways, but it does change you. And so if you've been through an experience like that, that's what we mean when we say trauma. And it impacts the brain. So a lot of times people don't realize that trauma is not just a difficult situation. It really is something that can change us starting in the brain. And so the easiest way that I have found to explain this to folks when we're thinking about trauma and what's happening, it's not a lack of faith. It's not a lack of your own strength or grit or ability. It truly is something that's happening in your brain. And so if you think about this is going to be my brain. Can you see my hand? Okay. Let me turn it that way first. I'm left-handed. Let me see if I can. There you go. Now you can see my thumb. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Think about your brain as three big parts. Okay. So you have like this back part down here, and then you have the middle part and the front part. Okay. So in this back part of our brain, this is the brain stem to put it just kind of really condensed, the brain stem. So we call this the reptile brain, kind of like the tail of a lizard, for example.
Okay. Okay.
Right? Okay, so the reptile brain. So this
Parts.
part of the three parts, yes, we call it the triune brain, three parts.
That sounds
So this
funky, is all I'm saying.
it yes.
I'm telling you.
We have a triune God and we are triune beings. People forget about that. We're mind, body, spirit, our brain, three big parts. We're triune beings. We're made in his image. So this bottom part, we call that the reptilian brain or reptile. Okay. So if you've ever had like a pet lizard, like an iguana or something like that, you know that you could leave the house for a year and a half and come, well, it wouldn't survive that long. You leave the house for a day, you come back, right? And that lizard is likely to not care, right? It might glance up, it's doing its own thing. So lizard, a reptile, it's concerned with a few things: eating, sleeping, breathing, reproducing. That is it, right? So that's this part of the brain. That's the stuff that keeps us alive, okay? Then when we get up to the middle part of the brain, that's called the mammalian part, just to boil it down, like a mammal, yes.
Okay,
So
let me.
reptile,
Okay, got it,
lizard,
got it.
and a mammal. So your dog, Caesar, for example, right? So Caesar, if you leave the house and you come back, Caesar's like, "Oh, what's up?" Like he's excited. Okay,
It used to
if
be.
you okay, now he's like, if you fuss, if you're like, don't do that, or come out of the kitchen, then they're like, oh, they have emotions, right? They show emotions. Mammal, that keeps you alive. That's our instincts. The middle of the part of the brain is the mammalian part that adds emotion. So we have instinct and emotions. The top part of our brain, okay, that is called the primate brain. So great apes and humans. Okay, so this part of the brain, that is how we process information. That's how we think. That's how we plan, executive functioning. The reason why you can go to college and Caesar can't. Okay, so all that stuff that makes us uniquely human, we will call it logic. Okay, so we have instincts, emotions, and logic. And then we have this little piece over here, which is the amygdala, but we're going to call it the alarm system. Okay, so this is the alarm system. Yes. So we have instinct, emotion, logic, and an alarm in our brain. Okay, does that make sense?
Okay, a little bit. I'm not.
A little bit. Okay.
I am not as intelligent.
Okay, come along with me on this journey. We will do this together. If anybody has questions, y'all let us know in the chat. So the three big parts of the brain: instinct, emotions, logic, and an alarm system. Okay, so the reason why this is important, when we have experienced a trauma, our alarm system gets very sensitive. So it gets tripped and triggered with a bit of ease. Okay. So when we haven't been through some sort of a trauma, then most of the time, it takes some pretty significant stuff to trip this alarm. A loud noise might trip the alarm. For a second, and you're like, oh, it was a loud noise. Or someone, jumping out and scaring you. It's going to trip the alarm. What happens when the alarm gets tripped is that this front part of our brain calms down. It stops working as well. Okay. And the reason for that is because when we're really in a crisis, we don't need this part of our brain to be as active. We need an instinct and we need our emotions. That's what we need. Okay. So you can imagine if like a bear burst through my door behind me, right? I don't need to have logic. I don't need to think, if I survive this, I should probably want to drop my dry cleaning. And then, okay, so I should go on Second Street first. I should probably go at 4 o'clock because there's less traffic. I don't need all of this, okay?
Right. Okay.
Well, this takes about 90% of our brain energy. I don't need it. What I need is to feel emotions, right? I need to feel terror, and then I need to have an instinct like run, okay? I would likely faint, but whatever. So I need an emotion and an instinct. That's it, okay? So the thing to remember with trauma and what this means for people who've been through trauma is that the brain actually starts to change a bit. And it can kind of leave a little bit of a signature, right, in the brain of someone who's experienced a trauma. So that means this little guy right here, this alarm, is really sensitive. So a lot of stuff can start to trip this thing up. And those things that trip this up are called triggers. Okay?
Oh, trigger.
Yes.
That's your trigger finger.
That's your trigger. Yes, this is that trigger. Okay. So let's put this all together and why this is important when we're thinking about trauma. So we've got a brain, we've got instincts, we have emotions, and we have logic. And now, if you've been through a trauma, we've got an alarm system here that's very sensitive. When our alarm sounds, our logic part of our brain turns off. Okay, because it takes too much emotion. So the logic part of our brain turns off, and the emotion goes up, and the instinct goes up.
So you
right?
almost go into survival mode.
You exactly go into survival
where
mode.
you get is this where you get the fight or flight?
That's exactly what the instinct. Fight, flight, freeze. They've added a few other ones, but basically fight, flight, and freeze.
Okay.
So yes, you feel an emotion really, really strong, and then you have an instinct. And that's why a lot of times when you have what people saying,
I'm just looking at Janessa.
Yeah, so that's
Yes,
why.
I see the comments, but I just don't want to interrupt her, guys, because
Oh,
somebody
sure.
did say something about they feel like traumas can actually heighten discernment, and we actually, Dr. D actually told me that like there is something called post traumatic growth, and so it absolutely can, once you
Yes.
have been, once you have been spiritually healed and all, all of that stuff goes on, then you
Oh,
certainly
yeah.
can have growth after a trauma. So yeah,
Yeah, so
go
you
ahead.
develop a great amount of wisdom
Yeah,
once you've got that turned down enough to where it's not a trauma response at that point. Then yes, for sure.
that's good. Okay, all
You
right.
got to
So
turn
go
that
keep
up
going.
and down. Yes. So when you've got trauma and it shows up in the brain, that's what's happening. You have a really sensitive alarm that triggers your brain, and when that alarm goes off, it can be anything, y'all. It can be something that you don't even register, right? So when people hear the word trigger, they think that that means it has to be some great big grand event. It can be a smell. Like it can be something so small that you might not even register that you were just triggered. It can be something that you smell. It can be something that you hear, something that you see. It can be that someone looks the same as someone who hurt you. It could be that someone has on the same cologne as someone that hurt you. Any of that stuff. It could be that you're driving down a street that looks similar to the street you were on when you got that horrible phone call. It can be any of that stuff because what's happening is your brain is designed to keep you alive. So that means it says, okay, I remember that horrific thing, and absolutely anything that gets close to that, I'm just going to sound the alarm. So you stay safe, right? So that smell, I'm going to sound the alarm. That noise, I'm going to sound the alarm. That person that looks the same, I'm going to sound the alarm. Sound, 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 sound. And what that does is it activates our instincts, it heightens our emotions, and it cuts off our logic. And as you know, as humans, we don't do super great without our logic. When we
No,
have a ton of emotions and
it's just
not a whole
straight
lot
up
of,
craziness.
yes,
Just,
yes, yeah. And so when I say instincts, fight, flight, or freeze, you're going to notice things like arguing with people. That's fight, right? That, oh, they tried the wrong one, right? You can try Jesus, but you can't try me. Like just kind of popping up,
that's a t-shirt. Try
ready to,
me,
it is a
not
t-shirt.
me.
And I saw another one that says, what did it say? Like have something, have something. So like you can pray with me, but don't play with me, something like that. But yeah, yes, I was like, okay, but yes.
That
So
t-shirt.
fight is actual fight. It is arguing. It's throwing things, like having that instinct to just kind of discharge all of that
I used
aggression.
to do that growing up. I did. Yeah, and it was
Yep,
like, I hate to say it, it was like a release to hear something hit the wall.
that's what it
I
is.
broke many of phones growing up because I would just get mad and just throw the phone, like throw the phone.
Yes, because
Not
that's your
funny,
instinct.
but it used to
Anger
be.
and
Yeah,
then instinct. Anger and instinct without logic. Logic says that phone costs money and you're going to have to replace it or you're not going to have a phone, but that's cut off. That's what happens. It's
yeah.
a freedom that
And
happens
then
in
on
the
the
brain.
backside, you got remorse
Yes,
and
yes,
trauma.
because yeah, because usually about 30 or so minutes later, depending on what's going on, the brain does kind of activate again. And then that's when you're like, oh man, like I got to deal with this mess. But yeah,
Yeah,
so you have
music does it too.
instinct.
Music
Huh?
does. No, I'm looking at the Salvation and Glory says music does it as well. And that is so true. We get to that nostalgia or
Mm.
that, you know what I mean? And you almost feel like you're back there. Like there are
Yes.
certain songs I still can't listen to. I think about my grandmother and she's been dead 18 years. And
Yeah.
I'll be crying like she died yesterday. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So they're just, and we'll talk about that,
Yeah.
like how some of that is still healthy and that's fine. But yeah, so okay, so we talked about some of the past hurts, um,
Yes.
and talk about a little bit how this not so we talked about what can trigger that trigger finger, that
Yeah.
alarm in us or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how that can hinder us, or how these traumas that cause this alarm to go off, how they can be hindering us, especially when it as it pertains to going into close relationships like we
Yeah.
talked about. I mean really, this I really want to focus on like the marriage and courting relationships, like let's talk about it a little bit.
Sure. 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 I was just glancing at some of the questions, some of the
Oh
things to
yeah,
make
take
sure.
your time, take your time.
Okay. Yes. So yes, okay. So in thinking about how this stuff happening in our brain impacts how we get into relationships or even how we are in this world. So when we think about trauma, it upsets five big parts of who we are and how we process. And these five big parts, they impact us, right? They impact how we interact with others, and they impact how we see the world around us. So the first one is safety. So you can imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, you can imagine that if your brain is kind of popping and firing off on you, that actually is connected to your nervous system in the body. So you're going to have physical responses, like perhaps a racing heart, shaking, sweating, maybe even disconnecting, just feeling like you're not quite like locked in, and lots of different things that happen in the body. But safety becomes a really, really big thing. The need to feel safe. And the way that that manifests a lot of times is in concerns with power and control. So not only will I do things to try and keep myself physically safe, right? Like I might start to isolate from other people, not let people get too close. You can
That's a
imagine
big one.
what, yes.
Things like that is more a big one because we have some guys on here. Because I see my friend Bernard on here. Like, that's a big one. It seems like I know that's not true, but guys actually have that defense mechanism. They act, they do that a little bit more than women, which is not necessarily true. But guys, that tends to seem to be like their go-to. Like, I just shut down. Like, I just, you know what? Even when you're
Mhm.
getting close to a person, sometimes they'll just kind of back away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, go ahead.
And that has to do with the way we're socialized. So
Okay.
men are socialized that it's only okay and it's only acceptable to show a handful of emotions, right? You can be angry, you can be happy, you can be okay, neutral. That's about it. You know, if a man goes and has a good cry in the corner, people look at that and they judge that, and there's something kind of attached to that. Versus if a man gets in a fist fight with another man, then they're like, "Oh, go ahead."
Definitely. Right. And that's the
Yeah.
part.
So,
Like, is there such a
yeah,
thing is there such a thing as toxic masculinity?
masculinity, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay,
Yes,
okay. So
absolutely.
guys, it's okay to cry, and
It
some
is okay
women,
to
we will
cry.
embrace that, and we will
Yes,
love.
as a society, we gotta take some responsibility for that. You know, because society socializes what's acceptable for men and women. So yes, yeah. Um, but yeah, so safety, yes. So safety is a big thing, and that can come in the form of physically wanting to stay safe, like isolating. I'm very isolated. Yes, isolating. And again, this stuff is not because you just rolled out of bed one day and decided to isolate yourself or to be
Right, right.
afraid. Or no, you're not at all. Yes, complex PTSD, complex, yes, chronic
And
PTSD.
you're not
But
even thinking of it because it's so, yeah. This is that alarm, and it's instinctive. Like, you just,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. You need to feel safe. You want to feel safe. That's one of the basic human needs that we all have. And when that has been violated for you because of your trauma, of course you want it and need it even more. So safety gets upset, and you can imagine that when we're trying to think about getting in relationship with another person, that feels very unsafe for most people because you don't know who that person is. And then if you do know that person and you love them, well, now are they going to leave me? Are they going to betray me? Are they going to break my heart? That sense of safety gets turned on its head automatically, you know what I mean? Because it's hard to connect to folks. So imagine adding that to having already experienced the trauma. So safety is one of the big areas.
I'm
Power
writing
and
it. I'm writing
control.
notes.
Okay, power and control is the second one.
Okay.
So power and control means basically feeling like you've got to have a sense of control, right, over the things that are happening in your life. Because if things feel out of control or variable, or like I'm not sure what's going to happen today or tomorrow, that is triggering, right? So that's triggering. A lot of people, even when they haven't been through trauma, can have some power and control kind
Okay.
of ways about them because it makes humans feel better. But imagine that much more so if you have had a trauma at the hands of someone else. And so when you're trying to get in relationship with someone, if you have concerns or troubles with power and control, you can see that coming up in wanting to control someone else, right? Being overly jealous, being very particular about the relationship to flow exactly like this, right? And you're getting too close now. I only want to give you this much, and you're trying to get that much. But it's not out of rigidity or out of being a bad person. It is out of I've experienced trauma in my life, and I'm doing the best that I can to stay safe. And sometimes that power and control need gets turned up just a little bit too high. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting for the person who's feeling like they have to keep all those pieces and do all that stuff. And it's exhausting for the receiving. Yeah, to feel like the person that they're trying to get to know has a lot of boundaries and limits, and it kind of has to go this way and it can't go that way, and you need to do this and be there. And again, the person's not trying to be challenging. They are typically probably working through their own trauma. So safety, power and control, esteem. So esteem has to do with the way I feel about myself, the way I see myself, and then also the way I see other people. Right. So if I view myself highly, if I am proud of myself, if I view myself as a worthwhile person, someone who has value, right? And then the way that we see other people. So do I see other people as like, oh my gosh, they're just a bunch of idiots? Like people are always out to get you. They're always trying to get what they can get. Nobody's really sincere. How do we see ourselves and how do we see other people? That is esteem. And that can really, really be something that hinders us when we're trying to grow and we're trying to move forward and get the life that we know that God has promised for us, and the life that we want to be living, and a healthy relationship. Because you can imagine if you don't feel great about you, you're going to attract people who take their cues off of you, right? So if you price yourself on the bargain shelf and someone picks you up off the bargain shelf, that's how they're going to treat you, because that's how you see yourself, right? And we teach people and we train them how to treat us, and we are going to accept however folks treat us if we don't value ourselves. And so esteem is very, very important and really, really can impact a relationship. And if you're not feeling super great about yourself, then yeah, you're also likely to, not attract people who view you highly. And you're also likely to go after people who you maybe not, don't even view as an actual mate for you. Because you're like, I'll take whoever will take me. You know what I mean?
I've done it. I've done it.
Yeah, everybody has.
And we all do it. Cause that's those people when we finally break up and everybody around us is finally like able to speak and say, what were you thinking? You're like,
what was that about?
You
Yeah.
was ugly.
Yes. And you look back.
Like I've done it.
Yeah.
It.
And you look back and
Nobody's
like, whoa.
ugly. Nobody's ugly. But that is,
Yes. It's not your person.
Yeah,
They're not
your
person. Yes, they're not your person. So safety, power control, esteem, trust. Trust is the other one.
You might have to hover there for a while. Trust.
And y'all throw some comments in if you got
like so many things
yeah
can trigger like antitrust responses and stuff like that. Like oh gosh, so many things. It could be traumas, but it could, just certain things like abandonment, like trusting, like those are the things that I've dealt with. Not as much, the first thing people normally think of when they're talking about dating and courting relationships is, well, they cheat on me, and certainly that is true, because many of us have been cheated on. Many of us emotionally or whatever, there's been infidelity somewhere in our past. But then there are there's different levels to it. And there's I can't even trust my mom or my dad because they left me, they abandoned me, or they chose a man or a woman over me. You know what I mean? Or things like that. So that trust is a huge one. And I feel like that one has a lot to do. That one right there. That one in particular, you've really got to really walk with the Lord, because it really starts with trusting him. Like that one, it really, because we need, I think on a human level, until you know who God is, you don't know trust. because
Mhm.
you can't. I mean, even there's scripture that says you shouldn't, you can't trust any man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think there's levels to it, and of course, there are going to be those encounters and people that you can trust with everything, especially like familiar relationships, mom and children, those kind of things. Of course,
Mhm.
you die for your children. They can count on you. You can count on them. But on the other hand, trust. We tend to think of trust as human, like in,
Mhm.
in terms of what we've encountered from other human beings, and we're just all fragile. But I think
Yes.
when you're talking about going into a marital relationship, that trust does have to be supernatural. And
Mhm.
so that's just a big one. So this is where you have to marry having trust of the Father trusting God,
Yes.
and then trusting Him that He has placed His love and his ability to be trusted inside of a man or a woman. And I
Yes.
think that one above all, I mean, yeah, you want to be able to trust your boss to some degree. You want to be able to trust your siblings to some degree, your friends. But I mean, you're talking about going into a marital relationship. That trust has to be supernatural. And so many people have been married, divorced, or have had relationships where they have placed their trust and hope in someone else, and that has just been like kind of squandered. and
Mhm.
and their idea of what a marital trust is going to look like is based on something that was never supernatural to begin with, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
If that makes
It
any
makes perfect sense. It makes
So that's
perfect sense because
yeah, supernatural trust,
yeah,
yes.
but
Yeah,
supernatural. Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying that. Yeah, they're struggling with trust too.
so you
Um,
go into
and
that, girl.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, and again, it has to start with any way that we get into a relationship with even ourselves and then someone else. It has to start with the father. And a lot of people struggle with how the two connect. A lot of folks want to pretty up the life that folks can see, right? Like, let me just lose some weight, right? And then I'll be good. Let me just get my relationship great. And then, I'm married and now, I look good and everything's fine. And we usually want to skip that step. We usually want to bypass our connection with the Father. But all of those things translate into our own healing. And then from our own healing, our ability to partner with someone else effectively. So, yes, trust is tricky. And you hit the nail on the head, Tony, when you were talking about us kind of applying our trust not supernaturally, but rather looking at folks around us. Because a lot of times when we're coming up for childhood trauma, for example, our parents, whether they're there, whether they're not there, whether we experience something at the hands of a caregiver, but whatever is going on, when we're coming up, our brains are still forming. And
That's
what
right.
we're doing is we're taking in every little bit of information and we are starting to develop the way that we view the world and develop the way we view ourselves and other people. And so, how challenging it would be for example, a mom, you know what I mean, to not be there. That's supposed to be the most foundational relationship you have, and how a child might interpret that. I'm unlovable, or you can't ever really rely on anybody because even my own mom wasn't there for me, or someone doing something to you or victimizing you in some way, and you think, well, this must be all I'm worth, or people hurt people. You can see where coming up and having things happen to you, it changes the way you see things and you process it through children's eyes. So it's not even always even close to accurate. Someone hurts me as a child and I assume it's because I'm dirty. You know what I mean? Or someone does something bad to me and I assume it's because I'm unlovable, because that's the only way I'm able to process it. And so when things like that happen, then we come up and we have those ideas in our head and that impact our ability to trust. And even if those things didn't happen in our adulthood, so at that point, our kind of lens and the way we see things is more or less formed. We have beliefs, right? We have core beliefs. And so when people deceive us or they hurt us or they abandon us or mistreat us and things like that, it can start to shake up our belief system and really impact. Well, then now, one of the biggest examples of this is the idea of the just world fallacy. So the idea that, we believe, hey, if I'm a decent person, then folks, if I'm a decent enough person, a good enough person, good things should happen to me, right? And bad things happen to bad folks, and yeah, they get theirs and everything is fine. But what happens when we experience things that don't jive with the way that we think, and our belief system, is it starts to break those things apart for us. So you can imagine how disorienting that is, right? Like, I'm a decent person. I'm a nice person. I'm a caring person. I do things right. Like, why is this happening to me? Why did God abandon me? Why does He hate me? Why am I not worthy of love? Why is no one there for me? It
Or what
really,
did I do
what did I
to
do
deserve this?
to deserve
That is
this?
the one that I struggled with forever.
Yes.
How can a little kid begin like what made me the target of this type of behavior? Why? What did I do? And that, I mean, that was, oh, it's just, girl,
Yeah.
go into that. Go into that.
It changes you. And so you can imagine if all that stuff is whirling around in you, that of course trusting someone is not going to be easy. You know what I mean? It's going to be even more challenging than it might be for someone who hadn't experienced that. Because now here I am thinking people aren't to be trusted. People use you. You can do everything right and bad things will still happen to you. You can be a loving person and people will still use you and take from you. All of this stuff. Who can just have that happening in their head and be like, oh yeah, I trust you. It's fine. And again, that doesn't make, yeah, people blame themselves. It says we
Yeah.
blame ourselves, it's not our fault. Yeah. That doesn't make us ridiculous people for having those ideas or those opinions. But that is the stuff that happens when you have had trauma.
Mhm.
Trust really gets impacted. And then the last thing is intimacy. So you can imagine, yes, you can
I don't
imagine.
even mean like, first people think it's like physical, but I mean just being able to get close to people. I
Yes.
do not. I had,
Yeah.
that's just something that it takes, and even in my healing, just it takes, I don't even realize sometimes that I'm being very surface.
Mm-hmm.
Even intimacy with God. The other
Mm-hmm.
day, I literally like broke down because some things that happened over the last few weeks, in my personal and familial stuff and things like that. And I sometimes I get super spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
so spiritual. What you say your grandmother used to say?
Yes, so heavenly bound, you ain't no earthly good. Yes.
So heavenly bound, I ain't no earthly good. That I get
Mm-hmm.
so super spiritual that that sometimes I'm always praying, always, reading the Bible and stuff like that. And that's wonderful. But I had not tended to my humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this delayed reaction to some stuff that had happened. And I had never brought it to the Father. Because
Yeah.
so I was like, fine.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with it at a surface level,
Yep.
but then broke down, like all the way down, like it had just happened. Because sometimes even with the Father, like I fail to be able to be intimate with Him. Yeah, He'll give me a word. Yeah, He speaks to me, but intimacy from He wants to be intimate with me. He wants to
Mm-hmm.
be intimate with us, but I can't. Like sometimes I literally forget. He's
Mm-hmm.
my father. I need this. This is what I want. Can you do this? You told me to
Yes.
tell the people this. I'm gonna do this. I gave them the word. What you want me to do? My bills need to be paid. Da 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 da. But I had forgotten to say, Daddy, I'm really hurting. Like
Yes.
this thing really hurt me. This hurt
Yes.
me, and I want to. I need to be intimate with you. I need you to love on me. I need you to pour out, and that I know for a fact that is something that just relationally I've also dealt with. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
talk about talking about going into marital relationships, we don't think of that as a father-daughter relationship, but that's what it certainly is. And I can only speak for being a woman, but I that is something that I need, that I know that I think because I've had so many traumas that I have to be conscious of going
Mm-hmm.
into, when the father says, you're going to be getting married or whatever, going into that type of relationship, that vulnerability that I'm like afraid of
Yes.
sometimes, that I've
Yep.
been so afraid of that I just don't do it. It just becomes
Mm-hmm.
like I don't do it at all. So yeah,
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, intimacy is very, very challenging for folks. And again, it's because of what you just said. You have to be vulnerable. The vulnerability that comes in intimacy, and you can see how all of those other things really add to that. You have to feel safe with someone. You have to be able to trust someone. You have to be able to let go of some of your power. You have to see them highly and esteem them highly. And so, yeah, all of that stuff has to be in place for you to open up and be bare and vulnerable with someone. And you can imagine that if you have been in a place where someone has hurt you, mistreated you, victimized you, deceived you, to be able to do that is extremely challenging. It would be extremely challenging because you have to be vulnerable. So yeah, I know for a fact that people struggle with that, with intimacy. And when we're thinking about those close relationships, that's something that absolutely has to be in place. Otherwise, you're going surface. So you'll start to see your defense mechanisms popping out, right? So if someone's starting to get close, it feels uncomfortable, I feel unsafe, and I do something to push you back or keep you away from me, whether I realize I'm doing it or not, right? So being super, super surface, not really showing those emotions, not allowing folks to go there, not telling people when you're hurting or even what you need, not setting boundaries for yourself, right? And or setting so many boundaries that nobody can get close to
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
right? Plastering a smile on your face all the time and just like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm good. And inside you're like crumbling and
Yeah.
falling apart,
Yeah.
but you won't tell anybody. You won't let anybody see that part of you. So what we tend to do when we struggle with intimacy is we develop and put a mask on. Like we put a persona up. We put something up that is the representative of who I am, right? So you can see that. I whatever it is I'm comfortable with you seeing, I'll put that together. I'll wear that as my mask, and you'll think you know me, but you'll have no idea, right?
Oh, that is
And,
me. That has been me. It has.
mhm,
Working through
yeah.
it. Working through it. But go
Yep.
ahead.
And sometimes I'll think I'll know me and I have no idea. So intimacy doesn't stop with other people.
That's
It
what I
stops
was
with
saying.
us
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will even disconnect ourselves from our emotions, disconnect ourselves from our hurts, disconnect ourselves from our pain. Because again, we don't even want to be vulnerable with us sometimes. Because when you unlock that box, what's going to come out feels either uncontrolled, unknown, or overwhelming. And we're like, no, thank you, right?
Yeah.
I gotta hold it together. I gotta take care of the kids, or I still gotta work, or life goes on. I gotta push, push, push. So I don't have time. And I don't have time to check in. I don't have time for
Yeah.
all of that. So yeah, yeah. Someone said dissociation. Yes, blocks flow. Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, those are the things that I have seen firsthand. Those are kind of some of the broad ways that trauma can hinder us. That was your original question. There's obviously many more, and it's specific
Yeah.
to each individual. And kind of how that represents and how that shows itself. But those are some of the big areas that I have found.
Okay. So, okay. So
Mhm.
now that now that I realize I have a trauma.
Okay.
It might not be abuse. It might not be that. It might not be
Mhm.
some of the big things. But what if I'm a person? I've gone throughout life pretty good. Everything's been pretty smooth. I've had some losses and all that stuff or whatever. So I've identified that there's been a trauma, even if it
Mhm.
was the losing a job that
Yeah.
I felt like I was for no reason, like I felt like I was rejected. Whatever the trauma was, I know that I have a trauma.
Mhm.
What do I do to start to heal? What
Good.
what are like practical, quick things? And well, of course, the healing is not quick, but you know what I mean. What do you do to start the healing process?
Yeah. Yes. I love that question. That's my favorite question of the day. Because I think because that's why we're here, right? So yes, it's going to depend. It definitely depends a bit on how the trauma is kind of influencing you and impacting you. And so people think of things like PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. They'll think about having those types of symptoms. People will think about depression, anxiety, and all different types of things that can happen following a trauma. So this is going to be very general information. I can't speak to all those things, with the time that we have. So it's going to just depend on kind of what you're experiencing, what your symptoms are. But the first thing you've already hit on. So the first thing is really to identify that there is a problem. And that's why we're having this talk today. Because like we said, a lot of times we can disconnect even from ourselves. And we can just push through, push through. A breakup happened 3 weeks ago and you're like, oh yeah, I'm good, I'm fine. Y'all been together for 4 years, you know what I mean? And you love this person and we're talking about getting married and you're fine in 3 weeks. While that's certainly possible, are you sure? To have in. So just making sure the first step is knowing what is going on with you. Were you one way before this happened? This thing happened, and now you're a different way? Because if that's the case, then it just makes sense to take a pause and at least unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So that's the first thing to do.
So
Understand and realize. Yes, pause, right? Pause and check out the problem. What's going on with me? Am I disconnecting? Am I putting up my mask? Am I less connected to God? Am I not praying as much anymore? Am I sad? None of that is to be judged. You just need to know what's really going on with me so that you don't spend precious time that you could be healing pretending like there's nothing wrong. Because I tell folks, you better handle those emotions because they will handle you. Those emotions will put their hands on you if you do not check in with them and figure out what's going on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really kind of wrapping your head around the understanding that healing and needing to heal is not a character flaw. It does not mean that you're weak. It does not mean that you don't have faith. It does not mean you are raggedy and jacked up because you need to take some time to pause and to think about what is going on with you. That is a stigma that a lot of people have. And they think, you know what, I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm fine. Like I should be able to go through this thing and just kind of pick myself up and move right on forward.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. I can't speak to every situation, but that's not always the case. So shifting the way that you think about needing to heal is going to be very important because if you have that stigma, if you have that belief that I should be able to just push through this, it's no problem, like no one's going to see me sweat, like it's fine, then you are likely to not do what you need to do to heal. And then spin around for 5, 10, 15 years in dead-end relationship after dead-end relationship, not seeing your gifts start to grow, feeling kind of out of it and disoriented and all of these things because you were stigmatizing yourself and saying, you know what, if I actually need to take a pause, if I actually need to take care of myself, that must mean I'm weak and messed up. So I'm just going to push through because healing really does come in waves. And there's a grieving process that is also a part of trauma that people forget about. You have to grieve the fact that you lost something or something was done to you or the way you saw the world is not really the way it is or you might not get this thing in this time or that thing in that time or whatever. There's a grieving process and grief rarely happens just like that, So once we take that pause and really check in, wait, am I different? Is something going on with me? We need to kind of shift the way we think about that and say, you know what, if this was a physical concern that people could see, if I broke my arm, it makes sense that I need to lay down. Like I need to do, well, maybe not lay down. I'm not, but I need to get some.
I've never actually, that's the simplest way to put it. And I've never actually heard it put like that.
Yes, yes.
Things that are intangible things, we tend to just kind of, it's not really there,
It's not there. Who cares? No problem. So we need to realize that. And then the other thing that I would say is, again, make sure that you're not ignoring that stuff. Make sure that you're not pretending like it's not there. There's no timeline on this. There is no, okay, I have to be over this in 5 months or 6 months or half the time of the relationship, right? They say, if you're with someone, then cut that time in half. And that's how long it takes to get over the breakup or whatever the case may be. It is not that. So change the way that you think about this. Don't stigmatize yourself. Don't hurt yourself worse by being upset with yourself for being hurt over something you never should have had to go through. You know what I mean? Because we do. We'll go through a trauma. It'll be something that was done to us that we really never should have had to experience. And then we beat ourselves up that we don't move through it just like this. And we're not just, yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but I did see somebody say that they actually did something. And I know we have a few more minutes left. I know that we talk a lot about things that have been done to us. Is there a such thing? I believe that there is, but you tell me if I'm wrong, you're the doctor. When we have done something wrong and there's a trauma,
yes.
What I cheated on my boyfriend or my girlfriend, or I stole something, or I am the reason someone lost their job, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what if it was something that I did?
Yes.
Is there a need for the same type of healing?
It's a moral injury. So that is a moral injury. Yes. So we have a way that we see the world. We have a set of morals. We have a set of beliefs. And when we do something to violate our own belief system, that can be considered a moral injury. And yes, that can absolutely be traumatic. So, for example, as not to trigger anyone, but for example, if someone had a belief system that you should not kill, right? Say they're Christian and they say you should not kill, and they're
Right.
also in the army and have to go to war.
Ah, so conflicting.
Mhm. Yeah, right. So some of the impact that that might have on them because they feel like they may have had to violate their own sense of morals and their own sense of beliefs. So it's very possible that we do something that either directly violates those things that makes us feel like we have a trauma, or we do something where we feel like we have started a series of events that resulted in our own trauma, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so, yes, it's very possible for us to feel like we have played a role in our own trauma, and that is not at all uncommon at
Okay.
all. And
Okay.
yes, people say, please, please, please forgive yourself. Then I ask them, okay, got it, sure, sure, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Because
so let
I
me
mean,
walk
that's just
up.
something we tend to think of trauma is like, well, somebody did that to me, and
Did
or
something
that
to
was done to me.
hmm
But we forget that we're all human. This is an experience, and a lot of the things that we do, especially we're on here with believers, we're not walking around trying to injure one another. But one way,
exactly.
I've hurt my daughter's feelings before. I've broken up with people
hmm
before and I've hurt them. And I know that the relationship wasn't right, but there is a weight that you carry when you inflict pain on someone else. And then you can possibly go into another relationship and you carry the burden of that guilt into that. And you're now feeling like you're not worthy because
Exactly.
this person looked great, they're wonderful, but I cheated on my ex. And I don't, but I
Exactly.
would never do it again. Or I
hmm
broke up with this person, I hurt their feelings. Or I feel like I betrayed their family because I broke up with this person. I've actually dealt with that. I've broken off an
Yeah.
engagement. I feel like I betrayed everyone because they love me so much. Or
hmm
we had these close connections, and now everybody hates me because and I know that I've just felt like I've gone into like you will I be able to go into a relationship and like be okay and like what I mean. I don't know, I'm all over the
hmm
place, but talk a little bit about how do you know well no, first of all, can you do you need to be completely healed before you go into another relationship?
I would say that's a loaded question, Tony. So I would say
Okay. I'm like, we only got a couple minutes, but
no,
like
that's okay. So I would say physical and spiritual. So spiritually, God can heal. He can restore. I won't ever say that He's not able to completely, fully heal and recover and restore. Physically, I will say most human beings are likely to be a work in progress their entire lives because that's what
that's
we are and that's
that's
who we are. You know what I mean?
that's
And so, might God have healed you from all manner of things? Absolutely. But are you still a human having a human experience who's likely to be healed of one thing and then encounter something else because that's part of the human condition?
mhm.
Yeah. And so, do I know that I can ever stamp anybody and say you're totally healed of everything, go forth and be forever healed? I absolutely can't. In my
No, I
profession,
asked that for a reason, and you answered it just like I had hoped you would.
I just say I don't know that I've ever seen anyone who's totally
No,
healed of everything. It's just
thank you
yeah,
for allowing us to be able to be vulnerable and
yeah.
accept it. Because I asked that reason. You know how you ask a question and you hoping for a certain answer. I was hoping for the answer. I could feel a little bit better about myself, but
Okay.
really, but really, because we are human and we healed. First of all, the Lord revealed this to me the other day. You can be completely healed of one trauma or feel like you're completely healed, get into a relationship, and then another trauma happens with the both of you. And so there's always going to be a need for healing, and God
Oh,
knows that because He literally says He's near to the brokenhearted. But the reason I asked that question about do I need to be completely healed, before going into another relationship, and wait, I lost my. Do I need to be completely healed before going into another relationship? And you said, well, it would, of course, that would be ideal, but that's a work in progress. It's
hmm
because we tend to feel. I've heard guys say it, and I think it's really an excuse for another thing, but we tend to feel like we are not deserving of a good, healthy relationship because we have injured someone else in the past, or
Mhm.
we have been injured, and we feel like there's going to come this magical moment. I didn't say godly moment. I'm talking about we feel like
Mhm.
there's going to be like a fairy godmother moment where we transform into this perfect human being, and then we can go to it. It's almost like when you know before you get saved, a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, I need to get right before I go to God. Well,
Right.
no, you're
Yep.
going to go to God, and
He's
He's
gonna
going
make
to
you right.
direct your path.
Mhm.
So,
Yes. Yeah.
so yeah, I just that's why I asked. I just wanted to clear that up. That I know that I see the comments, and a
Yeah.
lot of people have been have felt like they've inflicted pain. They're feeling some kind of way, guilt and shame, and all that
Yeah.
stuff, or whatever. But that doesn't mean that you are not deserving of
Mhm.
God's love, or
Yes.
God's love through another human being. You are absolutely, and I don't mean
Exactly.
just marital relationships. I mean friendships. Like like you are absolutely deserving of God's love
Absolutely. Absolutely.
through another person, because that's what He does in godly
Yes.
relationships. He places His unconditional love in another human being for you. Period. And so
Absolutely.
that's just something that He's ministered to me as y'all were talking. I mean, as you were talking, that you don't. It's not like you just become a perfect person and then you get the perfect relationship. Ain't no
Exactly.
relationship, and so yeah. This is amazing. This is amazing. So yeah, you keep on going. Take your time. I know that so many different topics to talk about, but guys,
Yeah.
we're going to be going back. We're going to be coming back on. I'm not sure
Mhm.
exactly when. Dr. D is busy, but we are going to get into, and we might, you might want to preview it a little bit. Like the we could go into so many different specific things.
Yeah.
I know that one that I
Mhm.
want to go into specifically is sexual abuse and
Mhm. Yeah.
physical abuse in general. That's one
Okay.
that I know that a lot of people who are connected to me have dealt with, and that's why the Lord has called them my way, because that's something that was literally the story of my whole childhood, almost to adulthood.
Mhm.
Sexual and
Okay.
physical assault and abuse, and so that's one that I definitely want to go into. Comment
Okay.
if you wanted to talk about that.
Please
Um,
do. You know.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that false doctrine of get it together first. That is the enemy's way of keeping you from the throne of God.
Yeah.
Literally keeping
Yep.
you from the throne of God, or keeping you from a good therapist. Because
Yeah.
therapy ain't no sin in therapy. God, and that's why I say some healing is supernatural. And you don't see it again. And that deals that pertains to a lot of physical healings, like
Mhm.
ailments and stuff like that. But when it comes to, mental, healing and things like that, intangible things that we cannot see with our human eye, with our physical eyes. There sometimes your supernatural healing is through the aid of someone like a therapist or a
Mhm.
doctor. You
Mhm.
go and you get medicine. You go and you talk to someone, especially Christian counseling. My mom was a Christian counselor. There, God has given His love. He's imparted His love, His wisdom to
Mhm.
some of His children, and then they're able to impart that into the body, and that's a beautiful thing. So there's like a wicked, like the
Yeah.
wicked doctrine of
Absolutely.
don't
Yeah.
go to the throne of God if you're dirty, or
Mhm.
you know what I mean. Like you can't go to Him like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They used to say everybody's welcome in church, but then people will be like, I don't go because I don't. But as soon as people walk in church and they're dirty, they're off the street, everybody turns
Yeah.
around and they're looking at them crazy or whatever, and it can feel like that. You know what I'm saying? And we got
Mhm.
to like get rid
Mhm.
of that stigma, that therapy's bad, that help is bad, medicine's bad, all of this stuff is bad, and certainly talking to another believer is not a bad thing. That's all the therapy is, especially, I mean,
Mhm.
as far as you go, you know what I mean. um
Yeah.
so yeah, but I know the next one that I think we should talk about is I want to discuss how to choose a partner and the red
Yes.
flags that we should not ignore. Because
Okay. Yes, y'all.
I feel like this kind of
Let's
flows from
do
that one
it.
kind of flows out of this one, because it goes into
Mhm.
that whole thing. Okay, so like we were saying, like how do I need to be completely healed before going into my next relationship? So I feel like there are some things in your next relationship that you shouldn't ever ignore,
Mhm.
but that you can work through. And then there are some things that are just straight up red flags. You
Yeah,
need to
no, 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 no.
stop time. Don't
Absolutely.
go. Don't spend $200.
Absolutely.
We're not. We ain't getting married. We ain't dating no more. No more dinners. Nothing like
Yes.
that. So I actually
Yes.
want to talk about. Oh,
Sure.
forgiveness. Yes, forgiveness is a good.
Forgiveness. We need
Oh,
green flags too. Green flags too. Yeah. So we'll talk about red and green flags and yellow flags. Like pay attention.
so
But yeah.
okay, quickly. I say we got like 5 minutes, if
Okay.
you don't mind. Quickly, what are some green flags? I'm interested in this. I don't
Green flag. Yeah. So I actually,
listen.
and I'm
Once you get a good therapist, guys, you would want to talk to them all day. I could pick her brain all day long. I'm telling you.
yeah.
What's a good
So
green flag?
yeah. So I think we've actually kind of touched on some of the things that we need to offer ourselves should also be some of the things that we're looking for the other person to inherently do and be able to do for themselves. So, like how we said, oh, we need to be able to forgive ourselves and be kind to ourselves. Green flags would be someone who's gentle, right? Someone who is kind, someone who forgives your missteps, right? So, so things like that. So if you notice how that person treats not just you because they're trying to date you, but also people
The
people around that.
waitress,
Yes,
the
so
old
yes,
lady on down the
exactly.
street. That's a big one. I pay
Yes.
attention to that stuff, y'all.
If this person has lifelong friends or even friends for years, those are great green flags. So it's like, okay, they can interact with someone and maintain a relationship of any sort for a while. You know what I mean? Not just like, oh, this person have no friends. Like they can't keep a friend for 5.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned they ain't got
Yeah,
no friends.
exactly, exactly. So yeah, someone who's gentle, someone who's forgiving, someone who is kind, someone who I sound like I'm quoting Corinthians. But that's a great place to start. But yeah, someone who's able to keep and maintain friendships, any types of relationships, those are great green flags. Obviously, someone who is respectful of you. And what you'll find is narcissism is a whole different thing that we can get
That's
into.
one
But,
topic, girl. We got to go into. Why? I bet everybody's gonna say no. Do that one next. Like
yeah,
that's one because that type of trauma actually that is. Oh my god. Anyway, yes. Go ahead.
yeah, you'll find with folks who are perhaps have more narcissistic traits, or perhaps even have narcissistic personality disorder. It's a spectrum, but you'll find those kind of insidious, sneaking kind of ways that they tear you down and pick you apart. Where you're like, wait a minute, I think there's something just I don't feel
It's
great, but I can't put my
it's a
finger.
Jezebel spirit. You can
Yes,
talk on
yes,
the psychological end. I'm talking on the spiritual end. That is a Jezebel spirit. Controlling, manipulative, you name it. Like that spirit. And it will leave you, you'll be like, wait, were we in the same room? Did I
right. Am I tripping? Are you
like
tripping? Are you
I'm
tripping?
pretty sure you
Like,
did something wrong, but why am I feeling like it was why I did
that
something
it was
wrong?
me, but yes. So a green flag would be the opposite of that. So when you don't feel internally like you need to be on guard, or kind of you're having the same conversations. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't feel like, well, wait a minute, like what did I do? You're having the same conversations. You're in sync. You flow. Your spirit will tell you. In psychology, it's like your gut, your gut feeling or whatever. But feeling like you feel a sense of peace with that person, you're able to flow with that person. There's not a bunch of head butting there. I mean, you're different people, so that's not inherently a terrible thing. But kind of like I said, it's kind of that thing you can't put your finger on. And the easiest way to describe it is it's the opposite of that narcissistic, like where you just feel unsettled and you feel uncomfortable and you feel on guard and you feel confused and like, what is happening? It's not that. It's the exact opposite of that. So that's
Praise
a
God.
great green flag when you do feel
Praise
comfortable.
God for
Well,
that.
yes, not on guard. You're feeling like yes, like you can be genuinely yourself, and all that stuff's not being subtly and slowly nipped at and torn down and picked at and ridiculed and all of that sort of stuff. Those are some great green flags. Um, and so, yeah, a lot of times with the green flags, it's easy to see them and I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, but to let those overshadow the red flags.
Oh, we do. Ladies, we do it all the time.
Yeah, it's possible for folks to have both green and red. And so as much as we can see, oh, that person's kind of this and that, that's a great thing, but we got to make sure to stay ever mindful of those other, those red flags. Because we'll let one little old measly green flag, I'll be like, okay, this is the one, she's the one. And there's like 17, they're like having a parade with like red flags everywhere. And you're just like, it's fine. They got that one green one. So yeah.
Fine, and it's fine in the beginning until those layers start to peel back and you see more of that. When those red flags become like the only flags you see, like, you know what I mean? Because sometimes those green flags aren't even the truth. But you know what? We're not going to go into that right now.
Yes.
I'm not going to be negative, Nelly.
We will get into that.
So I'm not going to keep you forever.
Okay.
We can continue this discussion whenever you want. Tell everybody what your YouTube page is so they can go and follow you, because you're going to be doing some of these on your own on your channel.
Yes.
It's going to be just so helpful for the body.
I hope so. That's what I'm here for. So y'all, feel free to take a look. So on YouTube, it is Dr. D, so Dr. period D, and then Come Alive. So no underscores or anything. They're all separate words. So Dr. D, Come Alive. And then if you happen to be on Facebook, that is at Come Alive Services, and you'll find me there. If you're on Instagram, it's Dr. D Come Alive on Instagram as well. And then if you are curious, if you want to hop on my website, learn more about what I do, I do have a workbook right now, because these things have been like massive topics about how do I even start this process of healing or recovery, or where do I even go? Where do I start? So I have a workbook. It's called Rise and Thrive. So it's all about those first steps of healing. How do I even get started? So if you're curious about that or want to check it out, my website is comealiveservices.com. So you can take a look there. And then on any of those things, I always have like my email address there. So you can email me if you have a question, if you want to know something, please comment here. Yes, thank you, Dr. D. Come Alive.
So sweet, guys. And she is a busy mama of a baby boy. I mean, a toddler baby boy, but she always responds. She's so good about that. She's so loving, and she's not just any, psychologist. This is a believer. This is a believer. This is someone who loves the Lord. She's a worshiper. So kind, and everything that she has her clinical side, but every ounce of her is coming from a place of God's unfailing love. So don't feel like some type of way about reaching out.
No, please
there
do.
there is so much healing that needs to take place in the body. I think a lot of times as Christians, we believe that our faith, and of course we're healed by our faith. Even Jesus said, go woman, your faith has made you whole, because that's what it takes. But I think we tend to think of that we can do this by ourselves. You know what I mean? And God has created us to be relational beings. He even said that He, His Son, and Holy Spirit, we created. They created us. The found that in the beginning it was them at the foundation of the world. It was them together. So God is relational being, and He has created us. It's not good that man should be alone. It doesn't just mean husband and wife, but it means we are relational just as He is. And we need each other. You know that song, I need you, you need me. Well, yeah, we do. We are, and it's okay to reach out. It's okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay to need somebody. It's okay.
Absolutely.
And I need Dr. D. If you talk to her, I promise you're gonna be like, I need to talk to Dr. D. Hold on. He done did me wrong. I gotta.
He did me wrong. And believe it or not, that's why I made the company more coaching. It allows me to be more personal with people, because, like I said, I say it on everything, but I always say I'm an experienced valley climber. So I have found myself in a pit myself. So speaking and talking to people, it's not coming from a place of this is a book or this is what, this says. It's coming from a place of I have walked this thing out. I know what this is like. I know what God did for me. I know how He helped me. and the things that he's shown me. And I want to be able to share that with hopes that it will bless and encourage you. So yes, that's part of the reason why I do this as a coach and not as a clinical psychologist, though I can do that side of things too. It's about relation. When you're hurting, healing, or hoping for better, you got to have someone in your corner who you can talk to, who you can relate to, and not be talked at. You know what I mean? So yes, absolutely, Tony. Thank you so much for all your kind words. So nice.
No, you're beautiful, Rebecca. It's Dr. D Come Alive on YouTube, Facebook.
You can pop in after this too and write a message, and
Yeah,
will
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, we'll do
Okay.
that because we're
Yeah.
going on an hour and 15 minutes, and I don't want to keep her on
Okay.
here forever. She's
All right.
got her baby. She's got her son to take care of. But yeah, so our next one, you'll let me know when it'll be. It shouldn't be too
Okay.
long from now,
Right.
but I think
Right.
we're going to go into how to choose a partner because I believe that the Lord he makes presentations.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, just like Ruth was supposed to marry Boaz's cousin. A lot of people don't talk about that. Boaz's cousin was supposed to marry Ruth. Boaz's cousin was like, "Nah, bruh, I'm not marrying her."
Yeah.
Boaz was like the next in line, and he had to do it. So he did it. And so I believe that the Lord makes presentations, and you have to decide based on your relationship with God, based on all of the equipping that He's done, if this person is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
He has His perfect will, but you have your free will. So we're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about choosing a partner, the green flags and the red flags. So
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you guys.
Thank you for
Yes,
having
Dr.
me,
D does
everybody.
work with men, of course.
Yeah.
She does.
Yeah.
She does. Yep. She absolutely does. So she's amazing. Like I said, child of God. So I love you guys. We're gonna get off and we will see you soon. Mwah.
Yes. Next time, y'all. Have a great night.
All right.